My name is Grace Preston. I'm 33 years old. Last December, my father looked me in the eye at a private dinner in Manhattan and told 40 people I was a nobody. He's a CEO. He runs a mid-size investment firm on Park Avenue, the kind of place where men in navy suits shake hands over bottles of wine that cost more than my first month's rent. He's used to being the most important person in every room. What he didn't realize, what nobody at that table realized, was that the man sitting 3 seats away from him had just wired my company its $9th billion transaction. And he was about to stand up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love reading those. Now, let me take you back 7 years, to the Thanksgiving dinner where my father said the 6 words that changed everything. Actually, no. Before Thanksgiving, you need to see where I am now, just so the rest makes sense. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights. No doorman. No view. The radiator clanks at 4 a.m. and I've learned to sleep through it. I keep 3 plants on the windowsill. A fern, a pothos, and something I bought at a bodega that refuses to die. That's my luxury. I wake up at 5:15 every morning. By 5:45, I'm at my office in Tribeca. It's a clean space, glass walls, 23 employees. No art on the walls except a whiteboard covered in equations that look like nonsense to most people and look like money to me. The company is called Viridian Capital. We run a quantitative hedge fund, artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithmic trading. If those words mean nothing to you, here's the simple version. We built software that reads the market faster and smarter than any human team on Wall Street. Last quarter, our algorithms outperformed every major index by 11%. Assets under management, $14 billion. I don't do interviews. I don't do panels. I don't post on social media. My algorithm speaks for itself. Most people in finance know Viridian. Almost no one knows my face. And my father, Richard Preston, CEO of Preston Capital Partners? I haven't spoken to him in 7 years. No fight, no dramatic exit. Just silence. The kind that settles in when someone tells you who they are and you finally believe them. That was fine with me. All of it. Until a cream-colored envelope showed up on my desk on a Tuesday in November. My parents divorced when I was 13. My mother, Eleanor Walsh, taught 10th grade English at a public high school in Bridgeport, Connecticut. My father ran numbers. She ran sentences. They met at a fundraiser in 1988 and married 3 months later, which should tell you everything about how Richard Preston makes decisions. Fast, confident, and without asking anybody else's opinion. For 13 years, it worked. Then it didn't. The details don't matter much. What matters is this. My father moved to Greenwich. He paid $2,200 a month in child support, the exact legal minimum for his income bracket. He bought a 6-bedroom colonial with a heated pool, and he sent my mother a check that covered groceries and half the electric bill. 18 months after the divorce, he married Caroline. She brought a 7-year-old son named Derek from her first marriage. She also brought a talent for decoration, a membership to the Greenwich Country Club, and an opinion about everything. I still visited. 2 weekends a month, like the custody agreement said. But every time I walked into that house, something had shifted. First it was my bedroom. Caroline turned it into a home gym. Then it was the photos. My school pictures came off the hallway wall. Derek's baseball trophies went up. My mother never said a bad word about any of it. She'd stand at the kitchen counter grading papers and say, "Your father loves you in the only way he knows how." I believed her. For 13 more years, I believed her. I kept showing up, kept calling, kept pretending the silence on his end was busy, not intentional. And then came the day I stopped pretending. When I was 18, I got a full scholarship to Columbia for applied mathematics. I remember the call. I was sitting on my mother's porch in Bridgeport, and the financial aid office said the words, "full tuition," and my mother started crying into a dish towel. We drove to the diner on Route 1 and split a piece of coconut cream pie, and she said, "This is the beginning of something, Grace." She was right. My father had a different reaction. "Skip it," he said. We were sitting in his study in Greenwich. Derek was in the next room watching cartoons. Caroline was arranging flowers in the hallway. "Come work at the firm. You don't need a degree. You need experience. Real experience." I told him I wanted to study mathematics, that I was good at it, that the scholarship was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He leaned back in his chair. "Math. You want to sit in a classroom doing math while I'm building something real?" I said yes. He cut off everything. Every dollar beyond the court-ordered child support. No tuition help. No housing. No car. Nothing. Caroline made it worse, the way she always did. She'd call my mother's house and leave messages. "Richard is heartbroken, Eleanor. Grace is so stubborn. She thinks she's smarter than him. She told people at the country club that I'd rejected the family business. She told Derek I was selfish. Derek was 12. He started showing up at the firm on Saturdays, wearing a little blazer, sitting in on meetings he couldn't understand. Richard paraded him around like a show pony. I worked 2 jobs through college. Graduated magna cum laude. My father didn't come. He sent a card. Inside, 1 line. Hope it was worth it. After Columbia, I got a job at Whitmore and Banks, one of the largest investment banks in New York. Junior quantitative analyst. Starting salary, $85,000 a year. I thought I was rich. I wasn't. Manhattan will cure you of that feeling fast. But the work saved me. I spent 14, sometimes 16 hours a day building trading algorithms, writing models, learning the language of risk the way my mother learned the language of Shakespeare. Line by line, late at night, with a cup of coffee going cold. Nobody taught me. I taught myself. I stayed late because I refused to be the person in the room who didn't understand the math. I'd sit at my desk at midnight, headphones in, debugging a pricing model while the cleaning crew vacuumed around my chair, and I got good. Quietly, steadily good. My second year, I earned my first real bonus, $4,200 after taxes. I walked into a jewelry store on Madison Avenue and bought a Cartier tank watch, not to show off. I wore it under my sleeve. I bought it so I could look down at my wrist every morning at 5:45 and remember one thing. I earned this. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody handed it down. My boss noticed me. His name was Malcolm Harding, a vice president then. Sharp, old school, the kind of banker who read every footnote and never raised his voice. He started assigning me the complex models, the ones the senior analysts avoided. I still called my father once a month. He always answered. He always asked the same question. "When are you going to do something real?" Then came Thanksgiving, 2019. The last Thanksgiving I ever spent with my father. I drove 2 hours from Brooklyn to Greenwich on a cold Thursday morning. My mother had already declined the invitation. She stopped attending Richard's holidays years ago, quietly, without explanation. I went alone. The house looked the same. The heated pool glowed turquoise through the back windows. Caroline had set the table for 14, family plus 4 of Richard's business partners and their wives. Crystal glasses, cloth napkins, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my rent. Derek was 20, home from Dartmouth. He wore a cashmere sweater and talked loudly about an internship at Goldman that Caroline had arranged through a friend. He hadn't earned it. He didn't need to. I sat between a portfolio manager named Whitfield and his wife, who asked me what I did. I told her I was a quantitative analyst at Whitmore and Banks. She smiled politely. Richard, at the head of the table, overheard. "Grace," he said, loud enough for everyone, "tell them about your big plan." I didn't want to, but he pushed. So I said it. I was researching the possibility of launching my own fund. A quantitative fund using machine learning models. Richard laughed. Caroline laughed with him, half a second late, the way she always did. "A fund?" he said. "With what money?" He looked around the table, inviting the room to share the joke. "You don't have the instinct, Grace. You have theories." He lifted his wine glass, smiled. And then he said it. The 6 words I will carry in my chest for the rest of my life. You'll never make a dime, Grace. I set down my napkin. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I looked at my father and said, "Thank you for dinner." Then I walked out, past the heated pool, past the turquoise light, past the centerpiece and the crystal glasses and the 14-place settings. I drove 2 hours back to Brooklyn in silence. My hands didn't shake until I parked. That night, my mother called. I didn't tell her what happened. I just said, "I'm okay, Mom. I just need to work." So I worked. In 2020, I left Whitmore and Banks. I took everything I'd saved, $230,000, plus a small business administration loan, and I launched Viridian Capital. 3 employees, a shared office in Jersey City with a tax preparer and a chiropractor. I coded the first algorithm myself, sitting on a folding chair at a desk I bought at a church sale for $40. Year 1, we returned 34%. No marketing, no press, just performance. Word spread through the quant community the way it always does. Quietly, in group chats and conference hallways. By 2022, our assets under management hit $400 million. I moved the office to Tribeca, hired 9 more people, started sleeping 5 hours a night instead of 4. In 2023, Malcolm Harding, my old boss, now a managing director at Whitmore and Banks, called me directly. He wanted to be our prime broker. He knew me as Grace Walsh. I'd been using my mother's maiden name professionally since the beginning. He didn't ask why. Good bankers never do. By 2024, we crossed $3 billion. I started using Preston again on legal documents. It was my name. I wasn't going to hide from it anymore. By 2025, Viridian managed $14 billion. Forbes mentioned us in a feature on AI-driven funds. I declined the interview. They ran the piece anyway, focused on the algorithm, not the founder. That was fine with me. My father didn't call. I didn't call. My mother knew I was doing well. She didn't know the numbers. She didn't need to. 7 years. No contact. No birthday cards. No holidays. Just work. And silence. And a bracelet on my left wrist that my mother gave me the day I graduated from Columbia. Sterling silver, thin, no inscription. She has the matching one. Then Malcolm Harding's assistant called my office. "Grace, Malcolm would like to invite you to a year-end investor dinner in Midtown, December 14th. Private dining room, 40 guests. He says it's important." I said I'd think about it. Then I asked who was hosting. "Preston Capital Partners," she said. "A Richard Preston. Do you know him?" I paused. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. "It's a common name," I said. I hung up and sat at my desk for a long time. The cream-colored invitation arrived by courier 2 days later. Heavy cardstock, gold-embossed lettering, the Preston Capital Partners logo in the corner. I turned it over in my hands. I could have said no. I could have told Malcolm the truth. That Richard Preston was my father, that we hadn't spoken in 7 years, that the last words he'd said to me were that I'd never make a dime. Malcolm would have understood. He would have quietly removed my name from the list and never mentioned it again. But here's the thing. I was 33 years old. I ran a $14 billion fund, and I was still letting one man's opinion decide which rooms I walked into. So I chose to go. Not for Richard. For me, because I was done avoiding rooms. I called my mother that evening. I told her about the dinner. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You don't have to go, sweetheart." "I know, Mom. That's exactly why I'm going." She laughed. Soft, the way she does when she's proud and worried at the same time. "Wear the bracelet," she said. "Always do." December 14th, 8 days away. I set the invitation on my desk, next to the monitor, and went back to my models. 7 years of silence, 1 phone call, and now I'm about to walk into my father's dinner as a guest of his most important banker. And he has no idea I'll be there. If you've ever had to walk into a room where someone underestimated you, you know exactly what this feels like. Hit subscribe, because what happens at that dinner, you're going to want to hear every word. December 14th. I stood in front of my closet at 5:30 in the evening and made a decision that would probably drive Caroline crazy if she ever found out. I picked the simplest thing I owned: a black dress, no label, no statement, knee length, long sleeves, the kind of dress that says absolutely nothing about how much money you have. I slid the Cartier tank onto my wrist and fastened my mother's silver bracelet next to it. That was it. No stylist, no blowout. I pulled my hair back, put on flats. Flats, because I don't perform power with height, and ordered an Uber from my phone. On the ride into Midtown, I pulled up Malcolm's guest list on my tablet. 40 names: hedge fund managers, family office directors, 2 corporate attorneys, a retired senator. And there, near the top, Caroline Preston, co-host, Derek Preston, VP, Preston Capital Partners. I read Derek's title 3 times. VP. He was 27. He'd been at the firm for 4 years, right out of Dartmouth, no master's degree, no analyst stint, no proving ground, just last name and a blazer. I set the tablet down and looked out the window. Manhattan in December. Holiday lights on Fifth Avenue. Taxis crawling. People on sidewalks carrying shopping bags. The city didn't care about my family drama. That was comforting. The Uber pulled up to a high-rise on West 57th Street. A doorman opened the car door. I stepped out, checked my watch, and walked into the lobby. 38th floor. Private dining room. 40 people. And my father, somewhere above me, pouring wine and telling stories about the empire he built. I pressed the elevator button. The elevator opened directly into the dining room. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Central Park stretched out below like a dark quilt stitched with streetlights. Candles flickered on every table. 8 round tables, 5 seats each, white tablecloths, heavy silverware. A string quartet played something soft in the corner. The room smelled like warm bread and expensive cologne. 40 people. Maybe 45. All of them standing, holding champagne flutes, laughing the way rich people laugh at parties. Not because something is funny, but because laughing is what you do while you wait for the real conversation to start. I saw him immediately. Richard Preston stood at the far end of the room, near the windows. Silver hair now, trimmed short. Navy suit, gold cufflinks with his initials, RP, engraved in serif font. He held a glass of red wine in his left hand and gestured broadly with his right, telling a story to a cluster of men who nodded at all the right moments. Caroline was beside him. Red dress, statement necklace. She moved between groups like a cruise director, touching elbows, tilting her head, smiling with all her teeth. Professional hostess? She'd been rehearsing this role for 20 years. And Derek. He stood at the bar in the corner, drink in hand, laughing too loud at something nobody else found funny. His suit jacket pulled tight across his shoulders. He looked like a kid wearing his father's clothes. None of them had seen me yet. I stood near the elevator, took a glass of water from a passing tray. Water, not champagne. And watched. Richard raised his wine glass. Chateau Margaux. He always ordered the same bottle at important dinners. He clinked it against someone's flute and said, loud enough to carry. To another year of building something that lasts. Everyone drank. I didn't. Malcolm found me before I'd finished my water. He crossed the room with that long, unhurried stride of his, 6'2", gray at the temples, reading glasses hooked on his breast pocket. Malcolm Harding always looked like he had just finished reading something important and was about to start reading something more important. He shook my hand with both of his. Grace, glad you made it. He smiled. Come. There are some people I want you to meet. He walked me through the room, introduced me to a family office director from Boston, a hedge fund manager from Connecticut, a woman who ran a private equity firm out of San Francisco. Malcolm was discreet. He didn't mention Viridian's AUM in front of other guests. He just said, Grace runs one of the sharpest quant funds I've ever worked with. They nodded. They were interested. They handed me cards. At one point, the hedge fund manager from Connecticut tilted his head. Preston, he said. Like, the Preston? Richard Preston? Are you related? I took a sip of water. It's a common name. He accepted that. People in finance don't push when you deflect. They file it away and Google you later. Richard was still across the room. He hadn't noticed me. He was deep in conversation with two men I didn't recognize. Probably prospects, given how hard he was performing. Caroline circled the room like a satellite. She hadn't crossed my path yet. Then Derek walked past. He was heading to the bar for another drink when he stopped, mid-stride, and stared at me. 3 full seconds. His mouth opened slightly, his eyes narrowed. And then he kept walking, like he couldn't quite place the face but knew it from somewhere. My hand found the silver bracelet. I turned it once around my wrist. Caroline spotted me 6 minutes later. She was making her rounds, touching a shoulder here, offering a compliment there, when she turned and froze, just for a moment. Then the smile came back. Bigger this time. Sharper. Grace. She crossed the distance in 4 quick steps, heels clicking on the marble. My goodness, I almost didn't recognize you. Her voice carried. The couple standing nearest turned to look. Everyone, Caroline said, placing a hand on my arm, a gesture that looked warm and felt like a leash. This is Grace, Richard's daughter from his first marriage. She's been away for a while. Away. She said it the way you'd say in rehab or overseas or out of her mind. Not estranged. Not pushed out. Away. As if I'd gone on a long vacation and simply forgot to come back. Hello, Caroline, I said. You look well. Thank you, sweetheart. She tilted her head. What brings you here tonight? Are you someone's +1? The question landed like a slap wrapped in silk. She said it with a smile. She always did. I was invited, I said. Her smile flickered. She looked at the invitation I'd set on the cocktail table beside me. Cream cardstock, gold embossed, my name printed clearly under the words RSVP confirmed. Her eyes stayed on it 1 beat too long. Well, she said. How nice. She excused herself with a squeeze of my arm that left a white mark on my skin. I watched her walk directly to Richard. She leaned into his ear, whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. His jaw tightened. He set down his wine glass, and for the first time in 7 years, my father looked across a room and saw me standing in it. He came to me. Of course he did. Richard Preston doesn't get summoned. He arrives. He crossed the room slowly, buttoning his jacket as he walked. A habit I'd forgotten about. That small gesture of composure he used before every meeting. Caroline stayed behind, watching from the bar like a coach on the sideline. Grace. He stopped 3 feet away, smiled. It was the professional smile, the one he used for clients, not the one he used to use when I was 10 and brought home a math test with a perfect score. That smile was gone. What a surprise. Hello, Dad. I didn't realize you knew anyone here. He said it lightly, casually, the way you'd say it to a stranger who wandered into a private party. I know a few people. He nodded slowly. His eyes moved over my dress, my shoes, my watch. He was appraising me the way he appraised a balance sheet. Fast, clinical, looking for the bottom line. Whatever number he arrived at, it wasn't impressive enough to change his expression. We should talk, he said, dropping his voice. Not here. Come to my office next week. His office, his schedule, his terms. That was Richard. Every conversation was a negotiation, and he always picked the venue. I'm here now, I said. If you'd like to talk, we can talk tonight. His jaw shifted. He wasn't used to hearing no from anyone, let alone from me. Before he could respond, Derek appeared at his shoulder. He'd figured it out. The face he couldn't place at the bar had clicked into place. Wait, Grace? He looked at Richard. You actually came? Hello, Derek. Derek turned to his father. Dad, did you invite her? Richard's answer was quiet, flat, a single word. No. He said it like it was an answer to more than just the question. A server rang a small bell and the room began to settle into seats. I found my place card at table 1, the main table, 10 seats, right at the center of the room. Malcolm had arranged the seating. He'd put me 4 chairs from Richard, with a clear sight line across the white tablecloth. Richard sat at the head, Caroline to his right, Derek to his left, Malcolm directly across from Richard, and me, between Malcolm and a silver-haired woman who ran a family trust out of Greenwich. As I pulled out my chair, I noticed a small leather-bound booklet on each plate. The evening's program. I opened it while the servers poured water. Page 1, welcome remarks from Richard Preston. Page 2, a timeline of Preston Capital's 30-year history, heavy on nostalgia, light on recent performance. Page 3 stopped me. Featured remarks, Malcolm Harding, Managing Director, Whitmore and Banks. And below that, in smaller type, Credit Facility Review, Preston Capital Partners. I read it twice. Then I understood. This dinner wasn't a celebration. It was an audition. Richard was performing for Malcolm. The wine, the venue, the string quartet. All of it was designed to impress the one man in the room who held the keys to Preston Capital's credit line. And that man, Malcolm Harding, was my prime broker. Viridian's brokerage fees alone generated more annual revenue for Whitmore and Banks than Preston Capital's entire relationship. $14 billion in assets, flowing through Malcolm's desk, managed by the woman sitting 4 chairs from Richard Preston. I closed the booklet, set it on the table beside my water glass, and I sat very still. My father needed Malcolm. Malcolm needed me. And nobody in this room, except me, knew both halves of that equation. The first course arrived. Oysters on crushed ice with mignonette. The room settled into the rhythm of a formal dinner. Silverware clinking, voices dropping, small talk filling the spaces between bites. Richard took command of table 1 immediately. He leaned back in his chair, Chateau Margaux in hand, and told the story he always told. How he started Preston Capital with $200,000 and a folding table. How he built it into a firm managing hundreds of millions. How Wall Street laughed at him in the beginning. He was good at this. Charming. Rehearsed. He paused at the right moments. Made eye contact with Malcolm when he talked about risk. Made eye contact with the Greenwich woman when he talked about trust. He never once looked at me. Caroline played her part. She nodded. She laughed. She touched Richard's arm at the dramatic beats like a stage manager signaling applause. Derek tried to impress Malcolm with a question about portfolio allocation. He quoted a sharp ratio, confidently, loudly, and wrong, off by a full point. I saw Malcolm glance down at his phone and type something. A note, probably. A flag. I ate my oyster. I listened. I said nothing. The silver-haired woman beside me leaned over. "You're very quiet," she said. "I'm a good listener." She smiled. "In this room, that makes you rare." She was right. The table was full of people performing. Richard performing for Malcolm. Caroline performing for Richard. Derek performing for everyone. And me, I was the only person at this table who had nothing to prove tonight. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say at a table full of egos is nothing at all. The main course arrived. The servers refilled the wine, and Richard stood up. He tapped his glass with a knife. The room went quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard held the Chateau Margaux like a scepter. "Thank you for being here tonight. 30 years ago, I started Preston Capital Partners with $200,000 and a card table in a rented office on 3rd Avenue. No investors, no connections, just conviction." He paused, looked around the room, hit every table with his eyes the way a good preacher works a congregation. "This firm is my legacy. It is my life's work. And tonight, I want to acknowledge the people who make it possible." He looked at Caroline. My wife, Caroline, who has been my partner in every sense of the word. Caroline pressed a hand to her chest. Modest, rehearsed. Then he turned to Derek. "And my son, Derek, Vice President of Preston Capital, the next generation of Preston leadership." Derek straightened in his chair, nodded once, tried to look serious. Richard lifted his glass. This firm is my family, and my family is this firm. Everyone raised their glasses. The room murmured approval. He didn't mention me. I was sitting 10 feet away, and he introduced his wife, his stepson, and his firm, and skipped the daughter who shared his blood and his last name. Like I was furniture, like I was a water glass that someone had set in the wrong seat. Malcolm looked at me across the table, then back at Richard. His brow creased, just for a second. A micro-expression. Confusion. He was trying to figure out why the host had just acknowledged everyone at the table except the woman his most important client had arrived as. I touched the bracelet under the table. I turned it once. And I waited. The main course was Wagyu, sliced thin, with truffle juice, and something architectural made of potato. Derek had finished his second cocktail and was starting on the wine. Alcohol made him brave. It always had. He turned to me between bites, loud enough for half the table to hear. So, Grace, what are you up to these days? Still playing with math equations? I set down my fork. I work in finance. Finance. He said it the way you'd say, finger painting. Like what? A bookkeeper? A few people laughed. Polite, uncomfortable laughter. The kind that means nobody actually finds it funny, but nobody wants to create an awkward silence. Malcolm didn't laugh. He watched. Derek grinned. I'm kidding. But seriously, it's gotta be rough out there for someone starting from scratch. No connections, no backing. Dad always said you'd figure it out eventually. Eventually is a long time, I said. I found a shorter path. The subtext went over his head. He turned back to his wine. But Caroline caught it. She looked at me with narrowed eyes, the way a cat looks at a bird that just learned to fly. Grace always was independent, she said to the Greenwich woman beside me, loud enough for the table. A little too independent, if you ask me. Some people they pull away from family, and then they wonder why nobody reaches out. She smiled when she said it. The practiced, pleasant smile of a woman who has spent 2 decades rewriting history in real time. I looked at Malcolm. He had set down his fork. His head tilted slightly, the way he did during quarterly reviews when he was recalculating a position. He was paying attention now. Very close attention. Dessert arrived. A dark chocolate tart with gold leaf. Caroline chose this moment, as the servers placed the plates and refilled the coffee, to make her move. She turned to the couple across the table, a portfolio manager and his wife, and said with perfect warmth, "You know, we tried so hard to include Grace over the years. Holidays, birthdays, we always left the door open. But some people just aren't built for family. They'd rather go off and do their own thing." She said it like it was sad, like she was the disappointed mother, arms open, heart broken, waiting for the prodigal daughter who never returned. She shook her head with just the right amount of wistfulness. Then she turned to me. Full eye contact. The smile stayed, but the eyes didn't match. "This table is for people who built something, Grace. What exactly have you built?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. 3 people at the table stopped chewing. The Greenwich woman looked down at her plate. The portfolio manager's wife suddenly found her napkin fascinating. I picked up my coffee cup.